What are shadow people? Firstly, they could be many things. No one really knows exactly what they are. All we can do is speculate at this time, although there is a lot of interesting research going on. And there are a number of different theories what they might be. So in this video we're going to just quickly try to explain them the best I can. First and foremost, obviously I don't know all the answers. No one knows all the answers to all the paranormal stuff, especially shadow people. They are an interesting subject with a lot of research going on. But again, I don't know all the answers, so I'm going to try and, bring about a general overview. All I can do is state, what is the general consensus and, what my own thoughts, feelings and, stuff I've read about it and bring that all together for you. All that I ask is that you keep an open mind to all the possibilities. It's always good to keep an open mind when it comes to anything related in the paranormal. And obviously, if you're more interested in the subject, I would highly recommend that you go out, do your own research onto it. Go read websites, read about paranormal cases of it, and start really researching it. It's quite an interesting thing. Right, most people who describe the experience of shadow being almost always describe as seeing them through the corner of their eyes, so the peripheral vision. And as they turn to get a better look, they normally vanish, although sometimes they can hover around for a little bit. Sometimes they move. In some cases, they just vanish. Sometimes they're seen walking by through walls and stuff, so through doors. And whatever these beings are, we know that they don't like to be seen. Almost always, they like to hide away. It's almost as if by accident that they've been caught when viewed and sometimes on camera. In most cases, you could argue that it is the imaginations playing tricks on the mind, or where we're seeing patterns that aren't really there, especially if it's evening time. Seeing shadowy figures within the corner of rooms is quite a common thing, and it can cause a sense of fear as well. And once you've combined all of that, it can obviously cause people to misidentify things, but in some cases there seems to be more going on than that. When it comes to what most people think and feel about shadow people, they seem to have a negative view of it. So it seems to be that when they are aware of them or see them, that they get, they feel like they're being watched, that they're being almost judged, monitored. Sometimes it comes with great fear of dread, sometimes fear of harm and stuff like that. In other cases, it can be more childish, as if they're being played with, watched. Now, most people who do see them, along with obviously describing a range of experiences, can sometimes describe them from just a shadow with no real form, just like a blob, and sometimes it's the very defined silhouette almost of a person. Obviously no facial expressions, but quite defined shadow people. It's as if someone's standing there and casting a shadow, but obviously no one's there. Now again, along with that, as stated, people do feel dread, fear. Sometimes they can almost feel paralysed or drawn into it, as if they're being hypnotised, so to speak. In other occasions, they explain that it's almost like communication going on, but not on a verbal communication, but almost on a psychic level. And it seems to be as if the beings are trying to read the mind. Now, regarding some of the theories of what shadow people might be, again, no one really knows what they are. Everyone has their own thoughts, theories. But here are some of the common ones. Now, the first one on our list is low vibrational beings or demons. So these are demons that are, or entities, so to speak, that are looking to harm people, interact with them. A low vibrational entity that is associated with strong malevolent feelings or desires, which is what a lot of people describe feeling once they're aware of these beings. Sometimes before, sometimes the feelings will linger after the being is gone, so to speak. Normally these beings don't touch us unless we generally allow it. So the key factor here is obviously to stay in control. Try not to give in to fear too much. You can turn lights on and it seems to push them away. For more information on low vibration beings or demons, I would recommend that you go onto the internet, do some research when it comes to these things, or speak to someone who's a lot more of an expert in those fields about how to keep yourself safe from negative energy or energy that's just generally not nice. But again, shadow people are connected to these so unwanted beings that are either, haunting a place or potentially just passing through. Now, one theory is that when you're in a location where this traumatic event took place, it's left psychic energy, almost like an impression on the area, both indoors and outdoors. And everyone's had this feeling when you've walked into a house and, you've walked in and it feels happy and loved, or sometimes quite cold, especially if people have had an argument. You may not be aware of the argument, but you walk in and you feel the atmosphere. And that's the same with psychic energy in places, that you become aware of it. And this psychic energy can manifest and take all sorts of forms, from floating energy balls, and that can all come together, and that can almost sometimes seem to form an intelligence. And that's again another theory of what shadow people might be. So they're built up negative emotions like anger, hate, jealousy, and this could comes together and just for some reason forms and then dissipates over time. Now, black robed figures have been described. Now, these are very different from shadow beings, from what I can read, and a lot of people can be confused between them, basically. I personally think these are two different entities. Shadow figures and the dark figures have no defined form to them, so we kind of see them out the corner of our eyes, and it eludes us no sooner, as soon as we try to look, they vanish. They try to hide, they don't like to show themselves, and the feelings are a lot less with them from what I can tell. They seem to just want to feed off fear energy and generally negative energy. Now, the dark robed figures that are closely connected, but I believe are different, are normally associated with nighttime, and these are normally while people are asleep. Some will get a sense of awareness as if there's a presence lurking in the room or approaching them or standing over them while they're in bed, and once they're aware of this presence, they are overwhelmed with fear, sometimes terror. People feel things and describe things in different ways, but the normal one is fear. Now, sometimes some people find themselves paralysed. If you're not sure what sleep paralysis is, basically could be described as that. So your body is almost paralysed, so you can't move, you can't talk, you can't scream. You feel very powerless, but your mind is very active and awake and is aware of the physical world. Now, when it comes to these types of beings, sometimes they just hover over the bed, sometimes they stand in the corner almost watching. Now, there is something called an old hag attack, which we will cover in another video, but that's a lot more personal and more not so nice attack, but again we will cover that in a different one, and those aren't associated to this dark robe figure or shadow people, but they are in the same realm of things, so to speak, and especially at night. Now, another thought for shadow people is they're some sort of interdimensional beings, so they're almost phasing into our reality, or that they're some sort of transient passenger passing through, so they're not really of our time or space. Some people believe that there are different levels of dimensions that we all live in, depending on the level of vibrations. Now, lower vibrations are normally referred to for demons and not so nice beings, and then the higher levels, angelic beings, and beings you'd want to associate with more because they're nicer, more caring, more loving beings, and they have a higher vibration. And that's part of the theory of the interdimensions and where these shadow peoples are coming from. So they are coming through, almost bleeding into our level of reality, so to speak. And that would also explain possibly why we're not seeing them fully as well, because they're not in our level of vibrational level, that they're kind of near it, and we can just like most vibrations or energy kind of bleed in sometimes. If you've ever played on radios, you can sometimes hear frequencies coming through on different channels and stuff like that, and the idea is that they're bleeding through, they're not coming through, and that's kind of how we see them distorted. That's why we only see them for a couple of seconds, that they're not really staying around for long. Now, another idea out there is that perhaps humans are travelling back in time. Perhaps they're unable to manifest into a solid form due to time and space, so they're going to look shadowy to us. Now, it could also be that to prevent any direct correlation, they're keeping this shadow, so it's kind of an observer, so anyone that sees it is just going to go, ooh, shadow, not really think of it. Possibilities for this are also a form of remote viewing, if you are aware about that, being able to see places, even different times, from a distance, and that could be manifesting to people that are able to pick up this energy, as shadowy figures, because the person isn't there, it's just their conscious, subconscious, and conscious, viewing a place from a distance. Now, the other type of being that it could be is something called an astral traveller. Now, if you're not aware of the astral realms or astral travelling, I would highly recommend you go and read about that. But these are levels of places you can travel to when you're asleep, or something known as out-of-body experience, or OBE, where people describe leaving their bodies in beds and travelling sometimes within our reality, so the room they're in, sometimes the same house, countries, outer space, and then worlds that are way more exotic than what you could think of ours. One theory is that what we're seeing as shadow people is actually one of us on our realm, but not with the physical body, but in an astral body, and hence that's why it's showing up as a shadow. Now, the other theory out there, and possibly a lot of people do believe in this one, some people completely disagree, is that it's extraterrestrials. They say that they can appear and disappear, and basically because of how they're appearing, they're trying to disguise themselves from us, maybe to keep it secret, maybe so we're not aware of them as much. it's all open to speculation, but extraterrestrials are a reason, a possibility for these creatures that are seen. Whether you wish to call them creatures, obviously, is up to yourself. Now, ghosts and spirits is a common explanation. I don't believe they're shadow people, to be honest. I mean, if you talk to anyone that's encountered ghosts and spirits, they describe them, and pretty much throughout the world, they're described within reason the same. Now, shadow people are described the same over all around the world as well, but they are vastly different in the type of feeling people get, the looks of them and everything. And normally with ghosts and spirits, they're normally, not always obviously, but they're normally white and misty in their formation. Sometimes they can be seen to warm clothing. Some ghosts have been described, certain eras of clothing with hats and stuff like that. Sometimes, people will recognise them and stuff like that through history. Sometimes you do get the feelings that people describe, so sadness, anger, happiness, sense of fear, protectiveness, love, that all come with ghosts, and also shadow people. But again, shadow people are generally not associated with ghosts. It is clear to myself from doing all the reading and research I've done that these are two separate entities, and I don't think they can be treated the same. Both seem to be able to read the mind. I mean, shadow people have been described seeming to be able to read the mind, or at least probe the mind, because people have described that type of intrusive feeling from them, where it seems to be, either manipulating or trying to provoke thoughts and feelings in people, and I think that's part of where the fear comes from. And there are ways to protect yourself from that, and if you go onto the internet, you can do more research on how to protect yourself from that type of entity. Now, another type of entity that it could be, that people have said, is something called a vampire type entity that feeds off energy. So we all know about vampires, whether you know them from movies and TV where they try to, drink blood to survive. An energy vampire lives off energy. Now, one of the strongest energies, as everyone claims, apart from love, is fear. Now, love is a harder energy to induce in someone, but fear isn't. So the idea is that these beings are producing fear in you, they're feeding off it. Now, if someone's around with a lot of fear, they might hang around. If it's kind of a quick startle and then they kind of ignore it, they're just going to move on. In my personal view, energy vampires seem to move around, so they're not made aware of too much, i.e., they move from one person, then go off. If they stay in a place for too long, people become aware of it. And, and there are things they can do that, apparently help take care of them and, move them on and stuff like that. So that was a basic introduction to shadow people and some of the commonalities about them. As stated, shadow people generally don't seem to be the same as ghosts. They seem to cause a lot of different range of fears and stuff in people, so fear, anxiety and stuff. And again, they seem to be clearly different from ghosts in the respects that, they are described as dark shadows. If this is something you're more interested in, I would recommend that you do your research and go on the internet, look up the cases, stories, form your own opinions. If you've got any encounters you'd like to tell us about, please comment below this video. Otherwise, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Thank you very much.